Buenas tardes a todos, soy Rosa Gallardo, directora de la Escuela Técnica Superior de Ingeniería Agronómica y de Montes de la Universidad de Córdoba, la ETSIAM, y en nombre de todo el consorcio Datagri, del que además de la ETSIAM forman parte ISPATEC, COAG y Cooperativas Agroalimentarias, pues os doy la bienvenida al webinar Innovación y Formación en el sector AgTech. Es un webinar que celebramos en el marco de Datagri 2020, es una edición especial por las circunstancias especiales que vivimos, pero que entendemos que hacen aún más necesario eventos como este para seguir construyendo el ecosistema imprescindible para acompañar al sector en la transformación digital. Gracias en primer lugar a ISPATEC por el apoyo técnico y a mis compañeros en la ETSIAM que se han implicado en la organización, Adolfo Peña y Tom Van Wageningen. Gracias a todos los asistentes, muchos, más de 430 inscritos, algo que demuestra no solo el interés de la temática del webinar, sino la calidad de los ponentes. Es un lujo poder contar hoy con ponentes de primerísimo nivel de las universidades que están liderando internacionalmente el impulso a la transformación digital en el sector agro. Muchísimas gracias a todos los ponentes, Laurence Clerc de la Universidad de Wageningen, Kima Serve de la Universidad de California, Davis, Alex McBrackney del Instituto de Agricultura de Sydney, que intervendrá a través de un vídeo grabado por la diferencia horaria, y a Tom Van Wageningen, también por parte de la ETSIAM de la Universidad de Córdoba. Y por supuesto un agradecimiento muy especial a Isabel Bombal, directora general de Desarrollo Rural, Innovación y Formación del Ministerio de Agricultura, Pesca y Alimentación del Gobierno de España. Muchas gracias por aceptar la invitación para intervenir y moderar esta mesa y sobre todo gracias por apostar siempre y confiar en la innovación y en la formación como ejes esenciales para lograr una verdadera transformación del sector agroalimentario. Creo que contamos con todos los ingredientes para asistir a una mesa redonda de altura, con la presencia de universidades con entornos socioeconómicos e institucionales muy diferentes. Hablaremos de innovación para hacer compatible la búsqueda de productividad y sostenibilidad simultáneamente, y hablaremos también de formación y de capacitación para cambiar actitudes, para lograr generalizar la adopción de estas tecnologías y también para tomar decisiones acertadas y adecuadas en el espacio y en el tiempo. Y finalizo, porque quiero ser muy breve y dejar el tiempo a lo realmente importante hoy, pero finalizo destacando un elemento que considero esencial y que creo que compartimos todos los que participamos en este webinar, y es la necesidad de construir alianzas, de colaborar, de cooperar, alianzas entre lo público y lo privado, alianzas entre universidades, alianzas con la administración, alianzas entre administraciones. Yo creo que tenemos un reto enorme por delante, porque los modelos lineales e individualistas han acabado, han dado paso a las redes, a las alianzas y a los procesos de co-creación. Así que, sin más, voy a dejar la palabra a Isabel Bombal, que será la responsable de guiar y de moderar esta sesión, donde podremos conocer casos de éxito de universidades que han apostado decididamente por dirigir sus esfuerzos hacia la digitalización del sector agroforestal y por establecer alianzas estratégicas con el sector para convertir el conocimiento en innovación. Solo recordaros, antes de darle la palabra a Isabel, que disponemos de traducción inglés-español. Debéis seleccionar en el botón de interpretación el canal que deseéis escuchar, español o inglés. Así que muchísimas gracias, Isabel, cuando quieras, tienes la palabra.
Pues muy buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Muchísimas gracias, Rosa, por, como siempre, tus palabras tan acertadas, tan precisas, para poder simplificar al máximo un mensaje que dentro de todo es tremendamente complejo, ¿no? Es cómo podemos abordar entre todos esa transformación digital del sector agroalimentario para poder culminar con éxito ese proceso que en muchos casos ya ha comenzado a ser exitoso, pero que todavía le queda mucho recorrido. Por supuesto, quiero empezar agradeciendo primero a mis compañeros de mesa, a todos los representantes de esas universidades que están liderando todo el proceso de transformación digital, el poder estar aquí hoy con nosotros y el poder compartir su experiencia, su conocimiento y sus puntos de vista sobre los distintos modelos que hoy vamos a ver para contribuir a esa transformación digital. Y un agradecimiento muy especial a todos los organizadores del Datagri, a la Universidad de Córdoba, a Cooperativas Agroalimentarias de España, a COAG y a ISPATEC, porque un año más, esta vez ya la cuarta edición, hacen posible que incluso en las condiciones más complicadas, como son las que este año tenemos en todo el mundo, sea posible la celebración de este evento, estos webinars que estamos haciendo, preliminares a la celebración de la Semana del Datagri en noviembre, que estoy segura de que, como siempre, a pesar de las dificultades, será un éxito para nosotros, para el Ministerio de Agricultura, Pesca y Alimentación. El Datagri es un evento clave para avanzar en la transformación digital del sector agroalimentario y lo consideramos nuestra participación siempre dentro de ese plan de acción que tenemos de la estrategia de digitalización del sector agroalimentario y del medio rural. Bueno, como habréis visto, todas las personas que estáis al otro lado de la pantalla, a los que también os quiero enviar un saludo, estoy haciendo mi primera intervención en español porque, bueno, pues porque el Datagri, al fin y al cabo, aunque es un evento de perspectiva internacional, es un evento que está organizado en España con todos los organizadores españoles y gran parte de las personas que nos estáis viendo sois de aquí, pero también os quiero trasladar que para luego no volveros locos con ir cambiando de canal en la traducción, cuando empecemos la mesa redonda, el debate como tal, pasaré a inglés, puesto que todos mis compañeros de mesa hablarán en inglés y así podremos también simplificar la labor del traductor y la labor de los que estáis al otro lado y queráis hacer uso de esa traducción seleccionando el canal correspondiente. Como decía, nosotros en el Ministerio de Agricultura lanzamos y aprobamos, gracias a la aprobación en el Consejo de Ministros en marzo de 2019, la estrategia de digitalización del sector agroalimentario y forestal y del medio rural, con el principal objetivo de contribuir a eliminar las barreras que existen de todo tipo para todavía conseguir esa transformación digital global de nuestro sector y de nuestro medio rural. Esas barreras pueden ser formativas, pueden ser técnicas, pueden ser de carácter legal, pueden ser económicas, pueden ser de conocimiento. Hemos intentado hicimos un profundo estudio con un equipo multidisciplinar de expertos para analizarlas todas ellas y para identificar cuáles serían las vías de eliminación o de contribuir a esa eliminación de dichas barreras, no solo desde lo público, sino también con esas alianzas que citaba Rosa, que para nosotros son estratégicas y esenciales, alianzas público-privadas para intentar abordar entre todos los actores que algo tengan que decir en este proceso de transformación, esa eliminación de barreras y, por tanto, ese proceso de una manera democrática, sin dejar a nadie atrás y consiguiendo que incluso los más pequeños puedan hacer uso de las nuevas tecnologías en beneficio de sí mismos, en beneficio de su actividad empresarial en el campo o en el sector agroalimentario industrial y, en definitiva, al final, en beneficio de todos para poder tener alimentos sanos, seguros, de calidad, variados, versátiles, a precios razonables para toda la sociedad. Y en parte hemos visto ahora cuál es el resultado de ese esfuerzo del sector, y es que durante la crisis del COVID, en los momentos más difíciles, el sector agroalimentario nos siguió abasteciendo de alimentos y, por tanto, eso consiguió que no se sumara una crisis alimentaria a una crisis sanitaria, y esa versatilidad para poder adaptarse a la producción de alimentos en una situación tan difícil de restricciones sanitarias, de restricciones logísticas, de cambios en los hábitos de consumo rápidos e inminentes como consecuencia del cambio de vida que todos nos vimos obligados a tener, en gran medida se debió al uso de las nuevas tecnologías, a la innovación y a la digitalización. Por tanto, es importante para sí mismos y para tener una distribución equitativa del valor añadido a lo largo de la cadena alimentaria, pero también es un elemento clave para la sociedad el poder conseguir esa digitalización en nuestro sector en beneficio de todos los ciudadanos. Y un elemento más, quizá más territorial o más vinculado a las características específicas de nuestro país. Hay otros países que también lo sufren, pero en el nuestro se sufre de manera muy acuciante, y es la despoblación en el medio rural español. Para aquellos que no estáis familiarizados con nuestro medio rural, debéis saber que solamente en el 20% del territorio, que es la parte urbana de nuestro país, habita el 80% de nuestra población. Por tanto, en el resto, el 80% del territorio que se considera rural, según la definición del ámbito europeo, solamente habita el 20% de la sociedad. Y además es una sociedad, la rural, que está muy masculinizada y está muy envejecida. Por tanto, es fundamental también el conseguir condiciones de vida y de trabajo atractivas para los jóvenes, para las mujeres y para atraer el talento a nuestro medio rural. Y las nuevas tecnologías son un aliado indispensable para conseguir todo ello, puesto que hacen que sea la actividad agroalimentaria, en este caso, que en muchos casos es una de las columnas vertebrales para la vida en el medio rural, se puede hacer mucho más atractiva y mucho más rentable y mucho más sostenible gracias precisamente a esta digitalización. Por tanto, dentro de ese objetivo principal que nosotros tenemos en la estrategia de digitalización, hay 3 objetivos fundamentales. Uno, el de la disminución de la brecha digital, otro, el del fomento del uso de datos y el tercero, el del fomento del emprendimiento y los nuevos modelos de negocio gracias a esta digitalización. La mesa de hoy está centrada precisamente en los aspectos de formación, de innovación, de establecimiento de alianzas público-privadas, el papel de las universidades en el ecosistema de innovación y en la transformación digital del sector y en los distintos modelos de formación y de transferencia de conocimiento al sector y casos de éxito, como ya nos ha dicho Rosa. Pues bien, toda esta actividad, de lo que vamos a hablar hoy, se centra en el objetivo estratégico número 1 que he citado, que es el de la disminución de la brecha digital. En el caso de la disminución de la brecha digital, hemos analizado que desde nuestro punto de vista existen 2 grandes vertientes. Por un lado, el acceso a la conectividad y por otro lado, la capacitación, la formación, el acceso a las capacidades digitales. Se hace realmente acuciante el tener perfiles mixtos en el ámbito de la agronomía y de la agroalimentación que permitan combinar los conocimientos agroalimentarios para poder desarrollar correctamente una labor empresarial en este sector con los conocimientos digitales suficientes, las capacidades digitales suficientes, no solo para saber manejar las nuevas tecnologías y el uso de datos para la toma de decisiones inteligente, sino también para poder identificar cuáles son los datos que realmente nos van a servir para poder mejorar nuestro negocio y qué tipo de tecnologías y en qué momento las vamos a necesitar para poder tomar esas decisiones inteligentes en beneficio de la sostenibilidad, tanto económica como social, como medioambiental de nuestro negocio. Por tanto, todo esto se puede abordar desde el ámbito de la formación, desde 2 vertientes a su vez diferentes, la formación reglada, es decir, la profesional y la universitaria, y la formación no reglada, es decir, formación para aquellos profesionales del sector, titulados o personas que ya tienen experiencia, que puedan adquirir los conocimientos necesarios para poder hacer el mejor uso de estas tecnologías y poder lograr incorporar esa digitalización en su trabajo diario y en la toma de decisiones en beneficio de su propia empresa. Por tanto, creemos que lo que hoy vamos a abordar es una de las líneas esenciales, fundamentales, tiene muchísima importancia de cara a conseguir una verdadera transformación digital perdurable, sostenible y útil para todos. Y en cuanto a la innovación con carácter general y a la transferencia de conocimientos más allá de la digitalización, decir también que existen muy distintos modelos, pero coincido con lo que ha dicho Rosa en la importancia absoluta de la cooperación entre todos los actores públicos y privados que pueden aportar algo para esa innovación, entre el mundo científico y el mundo del sector, entre todos los que de una manera o de otra puedan formar parte de una solución a un problema concreto de un sector o una empresa concreta. Por tanto, se trata de innovar para buscar soluciones reales a problemas reales. Probablemente tenemos mucho investigado, mucho queda por investigar, pero de lo que ya hay es verdad que en muchos casos se podría aprovechar mucho mejor si lográsemos afianzar y fortalecer este ecosistema de innovación y esta cooperación entre los que necesitan la innovación y que tienen la llave para poder aplicarla. De todos estos distintos modelos para poder lograr esto hablaremos hoy en la mesa y para ello contamos con unos ponentes de lujo a los cuales iré presentando en cada una de las intervenciones, pero simplemente por adelantar, decir que contamos, perdonadme compañeros de mesa si no pronuncio adecuadamente alguno de vuestros nombres, pero luego seguro que vosotros lo podéis matizar y lo podéis corregir. Contamos con Kima Cerf. Ella es directora asociada en la Universidad de California del Davis Innovation Institute for Food and Health. Contamos con Lawrence Clerk, que es profesor de Agrofood Innovation and Transition en la Universidad de Wageningen, en Países Bajos. Contamos, como bien ha dicho Rosa, que intervendrá por la diferencia horaria con un vídeo con Alex McBratney, que es director del Sydney Institute of Agriculture y profesor of Digital Agriculture and Soil Science en la Universidad de Sydney, Australia. Y finalmente contamos con Tom Van Balegen, que es vicedecano de Relaciones Internacionales y profesor de Ingeniería Hidráulica en la Escuela Técnica Superior de Ingeniería Agronómica y de Montes de la Universidad de Córdoba. Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros. A continuación, si os parece, vamos a pasar a vuestras intervenciones. Lamento si en algún momento os tengo que avisar porque tenemos muy poco tiempo, como sabéis, y tenemos que tener rigor con los tiempos, por tanto intentaré que así sea. Y sin más, si os parece, pasamos a la primera ponencia que va a correr a cargo de Lawrence Clerk. Lawrence, como os he comentado, es profesor en la Universidad de Wageningen. Él, además de tener un currículum extraordinario, es profesor de conocimiento, tecnología e innovación en la Universidad de Wageningen, de la que forma parte desde el año 2002. Él obtuvo su doctorado por la misma universidad y es experto en el campo de estudios de innovación agrícola y hace investigación científica social, estudia, da clases, supervisa, está muy relacionado con el asesoramiento, con la innovación y con el desarrollo profesional en muy diferentes ámbitos. Lawrence, cuando quieras, tienes la palabra.
Muy bien, muchas gracias, Isabel. Voy a hacer mis primeras palabras en español para saludar a todos los que están conectados por Zoom alrededor del mundo, pero la presentación la voy a hacer en inglés, la preparé en inglés también después para facilitar el debate que va a ser en inglés. Entonces ahora voy a compartir mi pantalla. Antes que hago eso, muchas gracias por la invitación. Estoy muy contento de poder compartir con ustedes y realmente tengo muchas ganas también en la mesa redonda compartiendo las experiencias que tenemos de las diferentes partes del mundo. Ya muy bien, voy a compartir mi pantalla. Aquí viene la presentación. ¿La pueden ver? Lo estoy preguntando. Ahí va. Bueno, yo voy a hablar de algunas iniciativas del BUR en relación al AgTech. Me preguntaron, I'm going to switch to English, very sorry. That happens when you speak several languages. I'm going to talk about some initiatives of BUR in relation to AgTech, and they asked me, can you present casos de éxito, success cases? I must say, I think the success of many of these initiatives is still to be seen because they have recently started, but I think many of them have a great promise. So I'll tell first a little bit about BUR's approach. So BUR is a university and a research center, a combination of those, which means that we cover the full spectrum of science from more basic science, looking at the more basic principles of plants and animals and also of technologies, but also we look really more towards the applied side. So how does it work out in the field? We work a lot together with companies, and so we have that full spectrum, and that makes it quite unique to have that all in-house, because in many other places of the world that is spread across more different institutes. So that's kind of a luxury we have here. Also, what is really important at Wageningen is that we take a transdisciplinary approach. So that means that we work in what they call the triple or quadruple helix. It's close collaboration between science, government, businesses, but increasingly also NGOs, civil society groups, because they're also important for innovation. For example, when you think about values of new technologies, societal acceptance, it's important to have society on board. we don't do this alone, like I already said. We are embedded in a very well-connected and interactive knowledge and innovation system. So WER has a lot of strategic alliances. We have very nice connections also with the ministry, with other universities. And also our government has several programs which help us to work in this way. One example is the top sector Agri and Food, which has a lot of missions to transition our agriculture to circular agriculture, to climate neutral production. And if you look at the last bar in this figure, you also see key enabling technologies. And key enabling technologies include digital technologies, a lot of agriculture 4.0 technologies. So there you also have gene editing, though there's still a moratorium on that. We have synthetic protein, all those kinds of technologies feed into those broader transformation. What is also really nice, because we are this combination of university and research institute, that there's also several close connections between research and teaching. So the students are very much connected to the university research, but also the very applied research makes use of our students. So some initiatives. And I am aware that all the pictures on the slide are probably really hard to read, but I will still try to explain them as good as I can. So one initiative in this area of digitalization is, for example, Agrofood Robotics. So basically this is a program in which all kinds of projects come together looking at robotics. Robotics in dairy, robotics in fruit growing, robotics in broad acre agriculture. And yeah, they look at machinery. They also look at questions like how can we make better robots which are more compatible with humans, so human-robot interaction. So this is a whole collection of projects trying to advance the field of agrofood robotics. And there in this program we also work with a lot of companies. Another initiative at Wageningen, which has started 2-3 years ago, is the Wageningen Data Competence Center. And obviously all these machines in agriculture are generating a lot of data, and Wageningen didn't really have specific capability to have critical mass in this field of data analysis, in this field of data science, so also doing better science through data. So this brings together teaching, value creation, so developing spin-off businesses, research in the field of data science, the Wageningen Data Competence Center. Another initiative, which is very nice, is the Farm of the Future. So we need to transition towards more sustainable agriculture, maybe also with circular models. And this is kind of an experimental ground where they apply different types of technologies. Nature-based technologies, for example, strip cropping, so combining different types of crops in one field, with robotics, with high tech. And so getting the agroecology closer to the digitalization. That's what they do at the Farm of the Future. And an example also there is, and I think I also put this somewhere here, is pixel cropping. So really looking at the level of very small dots in the field, how you can combine that with digital technologies to improve management. Another nice initiative we have currently, and it also connects to some of the issues which we will have in the discussion, is how to also get the private sector on board, how to also create new business activity. And this is ANF Next, Agri and Food Next. And this is a yearly event in which investors are connected to all that stuff which is happening at Wageningen University and Research. So also the different startups from our startup facility are connected there to investors to create these new unicorn firms with great technologies. At least that's the ambition. Connected also to this Wageningen Data Competence Center is a program on digital twins, which is much more research oriented, but it also tries to really increase our capability of modeling biophysical phenomenon, really integrating that, for example, also in a Farm of the Future, and continuously learning, and that the model also updates itself. So this is also a program which has started like 1.5 years ago. And what is interesting in all these programs is it's not just about technological research, but it's also about social science. And so, for example, in digital twins, there's a very strong pillar on ethics and social acceptability. And this social science component is also reflected in this initiative, which is called DigiMetis. So this is an initiative in which all the colleagues from social sciences, so ethicists, philosophers, sociologists, economists, we bundle all our knowledge on the different social science aspects of digitalization, which are very important because it's not just about the technologies, it's also about how to make them work in society, what it implies for markets, etc. Then the last example on this slide is the Waghani Academy, and this is also a kind of a professional education institute which tries to bundle all that knowledge we have on digitalization to bring it to companies. This is part of lifelong learning, and this is also where companies come to Wageningen to get the latest insights on digitalization. So what I already said, transdisciplinarity is very important. So interaction with the private sector and civil society in research and teaching. And here I put some things on the slide. So one interesting thing is, for example, that we really pay attention to this critique that digitalization is only connected to the current industrial way of farming, which we also try to change. And we now have very exciting programs like Synergia and this pixel cropping example, where we try to see how can we combine agroecology with digitalization. But it's also an example that we try to respond to critiques from society. Another nice example, which relates more to how to get students involved, is a hackathon. Here you see Cornell University. So this is part of the A5, in which also I think Davis and the University of Shanghai are involved. And this was a way to get students to think about how can we use digital agriculture for development and also for extension. So really make use of their creativity. And also we have student challenges where we really try to tease out this creativity from students. Then my last slide, not taking up all the time, is it's really stating that we're not doing it alone. We're is part of this broader ecosystem, and also what you see is that in the Netherlands there's other institutes which are getting into this agri-food scene. So one example is the Delft AgTech Institute. Obviously the University of Delft used to be a technical university more focused on aeronautics, etc. But it's very close to our horticultural center. So it's a logical partner. And it's great that also those types of organizations are coming into the system, because also they can complement Where Where maybe is stronger in plants, they might be stronger in robotics. And so we're not doing it alone, and we're also not the only one in the Netherlands. So this was my presentation. Thank you. And I will now try to get out of this screen sharing thing.
Very much, Lawrence. Very interesting, and thank you very much for sticking as well to
Yes.
attend. We are going to listen to Kima Thurb. Thank you very much, Kima, for being with us. As I said before, Kima is an associate director at the University of California at the Davis Innovation Institute for Food and Health. She is a passionate for developing and deploying innovation at scale across natural resource management, healthcare, agriculture, and food systems. She integrates academic and industry approaches into operational success. And she builds on 15 years of international innovation management with industry sectors, governments, investors, and academies to design interdisciplinary programs that advance innovation across the food system. So I believe your intervention is going to be very interesting with such a curriculum. Thank you very much, Kina. All yours. We can't hear you.
The usual Zoom faux pas. Thank you. I hope now you can see some of my screen, and I will put it into presentation mode. This should have done the job. Yes, excellent. Thank you. So again, I was saying to myself, it's such a pleasure to be joined with Isabel by these esteemed colleagues. There is so much overlap with our intention, but we are not quite at the point where we are coordinating our resources and our programming. But I am pleased that I had opportunity to visit Lauren's work in Wageningen and have seen the Farm of the Future, which is a great social study and accessible by farmers there to see this at work. And we continue to learn from our Wageningen colleagues on how to integrate some of this material, from robotics to sensing to data storage. So you will see that my presentation appropriately follows on with this notion that data enables doing. At the Innovation Institute for Food and Health, we are a public-private partnership, and through a multi-decade collaboration with Mars Incorporated, we found a great opportunity to work across our system to bring knowledge, as Lawrence had said, into practice. So we are lucky that we have this multi-decade history to draw on, but we also have a lot of players in the system that contribute to the possibility of enabling data and putting it out into real-world application, principally through education, but also through demonstration experiments. I will say a bit more then for the retrospective. I think we all have been following along, at least in the last 10 years. At the University of California in Davis, we bring together research, science, field studies, as well as these regional accelerators and what we call urban labs, so large-scale city experimental zones. And we've been fortunate to move along then from the probably decade ago perspective of data as an emerging trend to consider a slow and steady response, but now ever more in COVID, the real need to be agile. And I think we're fortunate at UC Davis, similar to Wageningen, it's a very comprehensive program. So we're able to go from the basic building blocks of bioinformatics and programming and analytics to actually move through some of the institutional barriers and enablers. And this includes bringing faculty along as collaborators, that they are rewarded for those interdisciplinary collaborations, but also ensuring that the knowledge partnerships enable quick exchange of data and ideas, and not just waiting for publications to slowly move into the pipeline. Obviously, new instructional programs take some time to develop at the appropriate level of rigor, but what we have seen in COVID is that our institutions can be responsive, but they definitely benefit from industry guidance and support across the region. So we're lucky in the United States, not necessarily previously in artificial intelligence in particular, but recently you will see there's been an injection of resources that emphasize this particular capability, and it's a technical capability that will reap benefits in the future. And that's something we may have heard and seen, for example, in the genetic technologies, and now we're seeing it in data management technologies. This emphasis at the University of California in Davis enables us to leverage our existing knowledge infrastructure, where we already work with industry partners and with technologies that are being developed for their benefit, with their needs in mind. And we recently were actually awarded the National AI Institute for Next Gen Food Systems just this month. And so it's a 6-partner collaboration across the country, where we are able to bring together all the resources and consolidate both the technical and social learnings as we move these innovations out into practice. We have physical locations where we're able to field test, either within our large-scale breadbasket within the Sierra foothills, or our equally world-renowned wine industry. We have attached to our campus a 100-year study that looks at detailed sustainability and productivity elements. We've been at work on that for the last 30 years, and we've been amassing a comprehensive data set that enables us to dig into what are the fine granular details that will position us to be responsive to a changing climate, for example. But hearkening back to this notion that the data is simply information, if we're not coordinating a strategy around implementing the learnings from that, we are fortunate to be alongside Sacramento, which is actually America's farm to fork capital. And so each year we bring together our farm to fork participators, and we actually close a city bridge and we host a large-scale feast in celebration of that capability locally. So working together across the region, our communities bring together the talent and the effort. We coordinate our infrastructure and resources. We enable field trials to take place, and we position these capabilities to access the larger scale market. That brings together the know-how in terms of being able to funnel that knowledge through our channels of distribution and connectivity. And across the region, the real achievement is to ensure that these innovations go to scale, because a proof of concept inside a lab environment at the scale of a field trial or even in a small community test does not reach you, the consumer, in an international context. So by working together across regions, we look to achieve what is necessary to actually realize the market opportunity with the knowledge and innovation capability. This specifically translates into a map of accelerators and incubators, which are shown here in this diagram. This actually forms but one arm of a full network across our region. And you can see in this innovation map, the yellow central piece is the UC Davis cluster. And if we drill down, UC Davis offers a host of learning and supportive resources that complement our full region's interests, from economics out into the field and beyond. And we work synergistically across all those players in the region. So we consider that we have what I would call a coordinated approach. It's obviously not unique. You've heard it from Lawrence, you'll hear it from Tom and from our colleague in Australia who's videoing in. But what we found is that at UC Davis, we have a particular opportunity to include ag as well as health in our multi-campus approach. And so I appreciate, and I apologize, the font is probably a little small for your transmission. So just to quickly recap, we have particular emphasis on interdisciplinary training from the undergraduate level through to the graduate level. We think it's important to bring this initial learning into the system as early as possible. We consider that the learning isn't just theoretical, it needs to be practical and applied. So our institute in particular works with programs that engage venture capital groups to host university students to learn the business practices of investing in startups and how to identify a successful potential business. So the additional piece that we take as a campus strategy is to place that particular effort on site in the community who's due to benefit, and that either is the farming community or the business community. We have outposts in each. As far as our experiential learning, we're very practically applied, including international posts across the world. We do have the ability to focus our data learning across many disciplines, and so that includes ag, analytics, community development, economics, and policy making. And one of the key pieces that we feel is a contributing infrastructure on campus is that we make the integration of industry and intellectual property increasingly seamless. It's not something that universities are well known for, and we've spent a lot of time in the last 5 years making that more accessible. But the genuine opportunity for industry to engage in our intellectual property development and for them to take our intellectual property off campus is facilitated by that structure. So through student learning, through academies, undergrads, graduate experiential learning, we come full circle because we absolutely recognize that knowing alone is not sufficient. We also must do. Thank you so much, Isabel.
Thank you very much, Kima, as well. Very, very interesting. And thank you very much for sticking as well to the time. Now we are going to listen to Tom van Balehem. He is Vice Dean of International Relations at the Agriculture and Forestry School and a professor at the Department of Agronomy of the University of Córdoba. His main research interests are in soil erosion and conservation, sustainable agriculture management, and long-term human impacts on soil resources. He is a doctor and agricultural engineer by the University of Leuven, Belgium. And throughout his career, he has published more than 60 papers and is the lead researcher of several international and national research projects. And he has collaborated with a lot of the top-ranking universities worldwide. So, Tom, thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabel, for the nice introduction. Voy a cambiar al español porque yo tengo preparada la presentación en castellano. Un momentito. Es que tengo un problema con el audio porque como panelista no puedo apagar la traducción por lo que veo. Perdón.
Y Tom, puedes poner apagado, ¿no? En el botón hay una opción
Sí.
que es apagado, ¿no?
Sí, ya está. Lo que pasa es cuando durante la presentación no la veía. Ahora sí, perfecto. Ahora sí, perdona por la interrupción. Espero que todo el mundo me escuche correctamente. Bueno, en mi presentación, como ha dicho Isabel, yo soy profesor de hidrología y de erosión y en mi trabajo, aparte de estudiar las tendencias más novedosas, estoy mirando también el comportamiento del medio ambiente y la agricultura a muy largo plazo. Entonces pensaba que sería interesante empezar un poco ver o recapitular de dónde venimos o cuál es el objetivo final de incorporar la AgTech, porque incorporar nuevas tecnologías obviamente no es un objetivo en sí. Nuestro objetivo a largo plazo es dar de comer a la población mundial, que la FAO estima que para el año 2050 va a crecer hasta 9.000 millones de personas. Entonces, es un reto seguir produciendo y además de necesitar aumentar la productividad sin aumentar la cantidad de tierra que tenemos disponible, necesitamos hacerlo teniendo en cuenta retos de la sociedad actual, como son, por ejemplo, pues el hecho de no contaminar nuestros cursos de agua, nuestros suelos, de querer hacerlo de una forma climáticamente neutra, sin emisión de gases de efecto invernadero, como ha sido propuesto por la Unión Europea, que es uno de los principales objetivos para los próximos años en su recién propuesta Pacto Verde. Y entonces, por eso, creo que es importante que por eso necesitamos las nuevas tecnologías o la AgTech, porque desde el inicio de la agricultura, en las tendencias que vemos abajo, en las gráficas que vemos abajo, vemos la evolución de la cosecha de cereal en Reino Unido, donde hay datos disponibles desde 1200, desde el siglo XIII, hemos sido capaces de aumentar la producción. Primero, sobre todo, ha habido un gran salto cuantitativo después de la Primera Guerra Mundial con la mecanización, con el inicio de los fertilizantes sintéticos. Y luego, a los años 60-80, aquí tenemos las últimas tendencias. Aquí ya tenemos datos a nivel global de la evolución de la población y la evolución de las cosechas de cereal, por una parte, aquí la superficie utilizada que se ha mantenido constante. Pues gracias a la revolución verde, que ha utilizado nuevas variedades, sobre todo nuevos métodos de manejo, hemos sido capaces en muchos países, sobre todo países subdesarrollados, de incrementar aún más la producción. Pero estamos llegando a un límite y, sobre todo, teniendo en cuenta los condicionantes climáticos y los condicionantes medioambientales, pues ahí es donde las nuevas tecnologías, la revolución digital, nos puede ayudar mucho, ¿vale? Entonces, la AgTech incluye diferentes campos. No solo tenemos que estar pensando en la parte productora, que muchas veces nosotros nos podemos concentrar quizá ahí, en el tema de sensores, en el tema de agricultura de precisión, pero también en mejorar los procesos de distribución, por ejemplo, para disminuir los excesos de producción. Y luego en la parte del consumidor, que el consumidor cada vez es más exigente y puede necesitar o puede requerir información sobre los productos que está comiendo. Hay mucha información de muchas diferentes fuentes posibles sobre el potencial de la economía AgTech. Cada empresa tiene sus estimaciones de cuántos miles de millones son capaces de generar o que se esperen que generará en las próximas décadas. Aquí he puesto un ejemplo que lo distribuye según los diferentes campos. Entonces podemos ver, por ejemplo, que la fertilización de precisión, los sensores de humedad, la aplicación de fitosanitarios, riego de precisión, reducción de compactación y siembra de precisión son todos áreas importantes, cada uno con un potencial económico pues, significativo, ¿vale? Y también en mi presentación quiero hablar un poco de la importancia de no solo de innovar, porque el inventar una nueva tecnología pues nos coloca aquí un poco en la zona roja, que hay poca gente que invente algo que lo utiliza, pero si realmente queremos provocar un cambio tenemos que llegar a toda la población. Tenemos que llegar también a una parte de la población que son las personas que son propensos al cambio, que la adoptan fácilmente. Y luego también tenemos que llegar al resto de la población que igual es un poco más reticente. Tiene aquí un espacio, un agujero, en inglés se llama chasm, un hueco, que le está dificultando el cambio. Y ahí yo creo que el rol de la universidad, y os voy a hablar de la ETSIAM, en particular nuestro centro, es muy importante mediante la formación, mediante la transferencia. Bueno, algunos de los proyectos exitosos que hemos desarrollado en nuestro centro, en la ETSIAM, tienen que ver con la mecanización agraria. Por ejemplo, aquí arriba tenemos un esquema del proceso del proyecto Olive Track, que básicamente utiliza la localización GPS que tienen ya los tractores que se usan en la agricultura de precisión, tienen ya un GPS incorporado, pues lo usa. Esta aplicación lo utiliza para hacer un registro de todas las operaciones desde la colección hasta la aplicación de fitosanitarios, etcétera, para guardarlo en la nube. Igual así con los datos de la industria y del postventa. Entonces, la idea es hacer un seguimiento total del producto desde su origen, desde su producción hasta que llegue al consumidor final. También han sido desarrolladas otras aplicaciones como el SAEO-Q, que es un proyecto de visión automático simplemente aquí tenemos una colección de unas aceitunas y mediante un sistema de visionado se hace una caracterización de ciertos parámetros de la aceituna, como el grado de madurez o como su calibre. Pues las nuevas tecnologías permiten automatizar todo ese procedimiento, hacerlo todo más rápido y todo más fácil, con un menor coste para el productor. Y por último, pues uno de los proyectos es también el Dosolivar, que incorpora una serie de sensores que permiten caracterizar el árbol, no solo su tamaño, pero también la densidad de hojas, etcétera, para finalmente mejorar la precisión de aplicación de fitosanitarios. Esto no solo resulta en un ahorro de costes, pero también beneficia al medio ambiente. Otros proyectos pues, están relacionados con los grupos que nuestro centro trabajan con drones, lo integran con maquinaria. Aquí vemos el ejemplo de una aplicación que ha sido desarrollada para la gestión de flotas. Inicialmente para la gestión de flotas, para la maquinaria típica para labrar, para hacer aplicaciones de fitosanitarios, pero también más recientemente para incorporar estas flotas de drones, incluso drones que han sido ya adaptados para la aplicación de fitosanitarios. Y en todo esto, en toda esa producción agrícola, pues cada vez es más importante el uso de sensores que pueden ser sensores multi o hiperespectrales montados en drones o con sensores remotos tipo derivados de los satélites Sentinel o incluso en aviones. Toda esa información nos llega con resoluciones diferentes, lo tenemos que integrar y ahí realmente está el reto en integrar esa información, saber qué información es importante, qué información es menos importante y pues combinarlo en la nube para el cálculo, como por ejemplo con Google Earth Engine, ¿no? Para aplicaciones agrícolas. También hemos trabajado mucho, compañeros míos de hidrología hidráulica, en riego de precisión, en el desarrollo de aplicaciones para que al agricultor le sea más fácil estimar la cantidad de riego, la cantidad de fertirriego que aplica en función de las condiciones climáticas, la función de las previsiones climáticas y obviamente todo esto se junta con el uso de sensores, integrar esa información que nos da la humedad de los sensores en estas aplicaciones. Porque ya no tenemos que depender, como hace a lo mejor 20 o 30 años, de unos cálculos de evapotranspiración y humedad del suelo. Ahora tenemos sensores tanto in situ como sensores remotos que nos dan una información en tiempo real, ¿no? Y aquí abajo tenemos una foto de una finca comercial real que ha sido regado con esa aplicación, porque como creo que también es importante decir, es que siempre es importante utilizar o demostrar estas técnicas en fincas reales para que los agricultores que estén interesados ven que realmente funciona en condiciones reales en las que ellos tienen que operar. Otras aplicaciones que estamos utilizando en los últimos años, por ejemplo, el uso de collares GPS para el ganado, que nos permite ver dónde, aquí tenemos un mapa de localización con las pendientes, podemos ver dónde se está moviendo el ganado. Eso no solo nos da información sobre la calidad del pasto, pero también los agricultores, por ejemplo, eso ha sido muy útil para ellos para ver dónde están las vacas en una finca que puede tener muchas hectáreas, pues es interesante y te puede ahorrar tiempo localizar fácilmente al ganado. Por otra parte, también en nuestro centro hemos estado trabajando en el uso de sensores NIRS para el control de calidad de, en este caso, fruta o carne para determinar qué tipo de carne, qué calidad de carne tenemos. Bien, y claro, como he dicho antes, todas esas innovaciones no serían nada si no llegan finalmente al sector. Y en ese sentido, pues muy recientemente la ETSIA, la Escuela Técnica Superior de Ingeniería Agronómica y de Montes de la Universidad de Córdoba, ha sido designado junto con la Universidad Politécnica de Madrid como Centro Nacional de Capacitación en Competencias Digitales para el sector agroforestal y agroalimentario. Está previsto que este mismo año ya vamos a empezar con diferentes cursos. Hay ya 8 cursos planificados y posiblemente ya para el próximo mes empezaremos a trabajar. También otra herramienta muy importante de transferencia son los grupos operativos. Nuestra escuela, nuestro centro ha estado involucrado en los últimos años en 14 proyectos de este tipo que engloban un agente innovador, una universidad, en este caso, con agentes del sector. Y por último también destacar, aparte de nuestras titulaciones tradicionales de ingeniero agrónomo e ingeniero de montes, tenemos también un nuevo máster específicamente dirigido al Digital Agri. Ha arrancado este máster el año pasado, tiene 25 plazas y había muchísima demanda. Todas las plazas han sido cubiertas y la gente está ahora mismo trabajando en las empresas que están colaborando en el máster y en otras empresas. Entonces yo creo que esas iniciativas son muy, muy importantes hacia el futuro. Y eso es todo. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Tom, por tu presentación. En esa última diapositiva, además, he visto reflejadas todas esas áreas de actuación en materia de formación que compartimos y que lideramos conjuntamente desde el Ministerio y desde la UCO, y me satisface mucho que sean una realidad. Okay, then we are going to see finally the video from Alex McBratney, who is, as I said before, the director of the Sydney Institute of Agriculture and professor of digital agriculture and soil science from the University of Sydney, Australia. Alex has several degrees in soil science from the University of Aberdeen in Scotland and from the University of Sydney for research in precision AgTech. So please, let's see the video and then we will go to the roundtable and the discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex McBratney. Hope you can see me. I'm sitting up in the corner. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Future Ag in Australia for this conference, which you're running in Cordoba. So hi, and hola. I'm the director of the Sydney Institute of Agriculture, which is the main research organisation at Sydney University looking at agriculture. And I'm also a professor of digital agriculture and soil science. The context in which we work is one where agriculture is increasingly important as an export industry in Australia. It's a 60 billion euro business and growing, but that's in terms of production, but we imagine AgTech can be bigger than that. And knowing how to do agriculture, which is another spin-off of agricultural science, could even be bigger than that. So we might be looking at a 100 billion euro business. So what is digital agriculture? Certainly technology, but is that really the driver of digital agriculture? For me, it's really about doing a new way of doing agriculture that's better for producers and consumers, a kind of post-industrial agriculture. So it's not simply driven by the technology. It's not technology in pursuit of a problem. There are various technologies to achieve what I might call a new agriculture, genetics. And I've given some guesses here about what proportion that these might contribute to the new agriculture. As I said, genetics is there, molecular design, new chemicals. But a large proportion of it is around technology and IT, around sensors, around data science and analytics, and about autonomous systems like robotics. And I'll just point out there's nothing new here because this kind of discussion was held at least 3 centuries ago in this book by Jethro Tull. There's a particular problem that we have in Australia. Australia is famous for producing bulk commodities like wheat and sugar and cotton. And the problem with commodities are they can be produced very efficiently, but you're always a price taker in a market. And when you're a price taker and you're dealing with commodities, you have to work harder and harder and harder to produce goods more and more efficiently. And in terms of agricultural commodities, that means the farmer earns less money and the environment is impacted upon. And in Europe, that's resolved by a common agricultural policy, which hands over lots of money to farmers. In Australia, we don't do it that way. We need a private sector solution. So we have to think how to make more money from farming so that we can maintain the farming community. Now, decommoditization is by no means a new thing. In fact, it's the basis of all high-value agricultural products. Taking wine, for example. In wine, you don't generally buy bulk commodity. You buy wine that comes from a known place, a known origin, a known date, and you pick the wine and pay the price accordingly. It's not just one huge bulk commodity. So the idea of decommoditization is common in Europe for higher value agricultural products. We think that we need to do this for all agricultural products. Where are we with decommoditization? Digital agriculture or precision ag has been simply optimization behind the farm gate. So we've been trying to produce things more efficiently using precision agriculture. But that can further fuel the commodity death spiral. So what we really need to use our digital agriculture for, besides optimizing our production, is to create segregated products along with information that can flow from the farm, beyond the farm gate, into digitally enabled supply chains to consumers. And then that brings us on to what might digital agriculture look like? Well, you'll see a farm gate in the middle of the diagram. And until now, most of the work we've done in digital agriculture is to the left, on the farm. And we've used particularly precision ag, which draws from ag science and economics and engineering. We've seen a bit of field robotics and sensing systems and a bit of data analytics, all about optimizing. But we have to add other processes onto the farm, gathering, being able to segregate products and produce them in smaller quantities and package them. We need to be able to gather information about the environment. We need to gather information about the provenance of the product, so that these segregated products, along with their information, move through digital logistics and supply chains to consumers. So we're creating digital supply chains. The goods plus the information, and the digitally enabled consumer will pay premiums for higher quality products with information. One of the reasons for doing segregation is to produce higher quality and safer products. And we do need to create and educate a new agriculture, for a new agriculture which is high technology, it's decommoditized, it's value added, and it's producer consumer connected. So in order to create that new agriculture, much research is required, but we also need to educate farmers. Farmers will have to be much more educated in order to do this. And we also need to educate consumers to expect these new high value, higher information products. And here at the University of Sydney, we do lots of work on digital agriculture. A little diagram from a couple of years ago where we cut out a nice logo in the setting sun, one of our wheat fields, an example on the right of flying an EM induction device to map soil moisture. So we're doing much work to improve digital agriculture on the farm, but I'm emphasizing that it's not only in the farm, it has to be through the supply chain. And we do things like setting up startups like AgTech. They had one called Area Crop, which tries to do daily soil moisture mapping, not for farms, but across large areas, so that we can have a daily soil moisture map like we have a daily weather forecast. So where are we with this digital agriculture? We think that digitally decommoditized agriculture, that's the full terminology, offers the opportunity. We need to make everything digital, but we need to decommoditize and use the technology to decommoditize. We have to agree on standards of how to do that, and new curricula to teach that. But nevertheless, we are certainly heading in the right direction. One of my criticisms of AgTech is a lot of it is solutions looking for problems. there are lots of problems that need solutions. So there's a lot of work needed in AgTech, but it needs to be done the right way around, and it needs to use more ag know-how, not just simply technology, but knowing about agriculture. So you need ag know-how embedded into AgTech. University here collaborates very strongly with farmers and agribusinesses to implement innovation. It's part of the process. In Australia, we work through research and development corporations for most of the agricultural products, which allows us to work with farmers and agribusinesses. And we are improving our teaching, particularly in digital agriculture, and involving much more students in our research in that area. So to conclude, and this is the main message from me today, digital agriculture is the new post-industrial agriculture that we have been seeking. But it has to be this digitally decommoditized agriculture, not just precision agriculture, optimizing production on the farm. It offers a much wider view of agriculture and agricultural education. The universities here in Australia are well placed to deliver in education and research. I think the main big message from all of that is it promises the opportunity for, but also demands the professionalization of agriculture. The people working in agriculture will need a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills. So agriculture will have to become more professional. And thank you. I'll give you a second to read that. I am indeed an optimist. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that interesting video and that vision about the use of digitalization to decommoditize agri-food products. Very interesting for the added value. So right now we have almost 30 minutes. We are going to have discussion. My proposal is to have a 20 minutes discussion and then have 5-10 minutes for some questions, if you agree, some questions from the viewers. So we are going to have this discussion with all the speakers to exchange points of view and enrich the conclusions of this roundtable. I will share some questions with you in order to compose the different models, or to enrich your introduction with your different PowerPoints you've used. And for the viewers, please, you can write down your questions in the questions and answers button or in the chat ones, I think. Is that correct, Rosa?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, and then Rosa will be with Anna collecting them to shoot them to the different speakers.
That's
so
right.
Let's start. I will pose a question to you all, but I think this is a very brief question because you all have already talked about this. So please, just for you all to introduce this debate in just 1 minute. We've been talking about different initiatives for public-private collaboration, which is, from your point of view, the key of the success of these initiatives for public-private collaboration to reduce the digital gap in the agri-food and forestry sector and to make it successful and attractive. So please, Lawrence, can you start?
Well, thank you. Well, obviously, there's a lot of, people in the innovation system or innovation ecosystem which can help, for example, farmers or foresters adopt new technologies. And I think Tom also referred to the adoption curve with the early adopters and the innovators and the late adopters, etc. I think it's very important to realize that adoption is not something which only lies at the level of the individual. And often to enable adoption at the level of the individual, you need to work on the whole system around that. And that requires a synchronized, coordinated effort by multiple parties. To give you an example, we looked at automated milking system adoption in Australia, and what you could see there that at different points in the process, different things needed to be addressed. There were no data sharing standards. The technology was not adapted to the Australian farms or the Australian cows. There were huge capability gaps with extensionists, also with farmers. So that really requires that those different parties come together to say, what are we facing, and that the right interventions happen at the right time. Because then it becomes easier for farmers to adopt, because the risks become lower, also the costs become lower, the technologies are more adequate for the situation. Because I think with this AgTech, we tend to think about this as something universal, but it can't be universal because all the different agricultures are different. So I keep it with that to not take away all the time from my other colleagues.
Thank you so much. Do you agree, Kina?
Absolutely. I think the real power in a partnership is that we bring everyone to the table very early on. And I think there's a tendency of universities just historically to consider themselves as the source of knowledge. However, the partnership needs to be a genuine exchange. And so what we've found is that it's important to have farmers literally in the room at the table, and that takes us away from feeling like we have the knowledge and they need to apply it. It also really reinforces, and this comes back to the digital reality or the technology reality, it needs to be a consumer-focused engagement so that we're looking at what is the burden on the farmer to implement the technology we are suggesting. In California, and we have to remember, our economy is the same size, actually it's more now than France, a little less than Germany, so we have quite a scale of operation. And the farms that you see across the country, but in California in particular, they extend to the horizon. You literally cannot see the edges. And so at that scale of farming, if you engage with a producer and mention what is his data need, you will find that he is already using 32 platforms, and how possibly can that be coordinated into sensory decision making. So what Lawrence has said about coordinating across the community, they need our assistance to streamline these burdens onto an already busy life and enabling them through increased connectivity at the infrastructure level, so governments who are actually ensuring that Wi-Fi is possible to enable GPS operation on the farm, and then working within the community to give the farmers a sense of data protection, that they're not being exploited for this purpose. So it's definitely a two-way street, and the relationship and the conversation should start early on.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom, what can you add to these reflections?
Yeah, I think those are two very excellent reflections, and I think I have the same to say. I would stress even more that the whole process should be multi-actor, as both Kima and Lawrence has said. But I would say the problem definition should probably come from the farmer or from the farmer communities. So it's like Kima said, at the university, I think we often have the knowledge, we think this is what we have to do, but it might not be perceived as a real problem in the farming community. I would add to that even one additional difficulty. I think, especially in Spain and also many other European countries, it's a highly complex problem because the farmer communities are very diverse. There are huge farming systems which are already working with digital agricultural projects, are very forefront runners, and there are very small farms who might also benefit from the digital innovations, but it will be a very challenging task to include everybody in this digital revolution. So we will have to think very carefully about how to bring it about through the whole spectrum, and probably design specific strategies for specific farming systems.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question, let's start with you, Tom, as you are working here in Spain and you know very, very well this special situation. I was telling before when I was introducing the roundtable that we need to make attractive the agri-food sector for young people and for women, to make possible that they can and live in our rural areas in a stable way. So how could we intensify existing measures or even propose new ones to have a bigger impact on women and young people for this, to make agri-food sector attractive to them?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. And I'm very glad that Alex McBratney's presentation from Sydney was the last one, because he really stressed very hard that digital agricultural will mean that agriculture will have to be more professional. So we will need professionals in Spain and also in other European countries. A lot of agriculture, a lot of farmers nowadays are reaching their pension age or not young, or reaching their pension age, and there are also very little women, because it's traditionally a very hard job. It's not easy. It's also not very profitable. So I think once we make it more professional, we can attract good young people. And we will have to try from the universities, I think, and from the public administrations, that a lot of women also enter in engineering sciences. We are working on that very hard. Rosa knows much more about this, but we bring out the science to the people, to parks. We go to them with sensors and drones, like on a European researcher night. We go out with the different research groups to the park, and we show what we are doing. And we go out to schools to talk to high school students in order to attract women and young people, make it attractive for them to work in agriculture.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that maybe there is a reputational issue as well. What do you think, Kima? Is that something we have to improve from the public side?
Yes, thank you, Isabel. I really like your comment on reputation. I think within the university operations, the reputation can work for us and against us. We are both seen to be engaging, and certainly in California, we are lucky to have a fairly active, what we call an extension network, and that is extension agents whose job it is to take the knowledge to the field, like Tom has mentioned, go to the communities. But I think the other side of that coin really has the knowledge base of the university in an ivory tower. And at times we like that. We like to consider that our knowledge is sacred. And historically, that has been what has enabled universities to persevere. They are a unique source of foundational knowledge. But unless we both take our tools and go to the field, then we won't have a good, balanced, productive crop to be developed. But in California, you raise a really good point around workforce engagement. And for underrepresented minorities, this covers not just women, of course, but all sorts of other minority groups who are marginalized in our education and outreach. So a couple of the things that occur to me and that are at play here, Tom has mentioned engage early and engage frequently so that they see it in role models at various stages of their career trajectory, and so that their families and their support networks see these role models so that they are not going against the flow, but can be supported by their families to go to these new places, which might be foreign to their immediate communities. And the other things that Tom has mentioned, I'll just expand upon. There's a huge impediment to land acquisition. So usually we inherit these pieces. You mentioned that a lot of the pieces of land now are owned by those who are retiring. They don't have the land to give to the next generation, so they will sell the land, and it's very expensive. So we need to support our next generation with actually getting into the market of land management. And then the other aspect that's very relevant for Californian workforce is this notion of robotics. And we're very lucky, we're working both with breeders on the plant end and then robotics developers on the sensory and assisted harvesting end. And together we paint a picture of how the workforce will be assisted to greater productivity and efficiency. We had previously encountered, and this comes back to Tom's innovation curve, a fear among the public that robotics meant replacement of workers, but the robotics revolution is a slow one that is being better harnessed with workers than to replace workers. And I think that's what we'll see in the immediate future.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, very interesting. I can see that we share many problems throughout the world, many different models, but many problems are the same. And this about the land acquisition is a very severe problem here. So please, Lawrence, can you give us your point of view?
Yes, well, I agree with many of the points raised by my colleagues. I think that the topic of new entrants is a very important one. I think we need to seek ways to also maybe go beyond the term of agriculture to make kind of the food system sphere attractive. So I would connect much more to this issue of food systems and sustainable food systems. I think that engages many more people also from urban areas to consider careers in agriculture, because agriculture is one part of food systems. So that would be one entry point. And I also see that happening, that at many non-traditional agricultural universities, through the lens of food systems, many more students get engaged. Here in the Netherlands at Utrecht University, non-agricultural, Erasmus University Rotterdam, non-agricultural, Delft University of Technology, non-agricultural, but they all now engage with it because food systems transformation is a hot topic. And that both includes a land-based production system, but let's not forget also urban agriculture. I know that won't solve the problem of depopulation in the rural areas, but concepts like vertical agriculture, very interesting also for a young group of food producers. And also make sure that it becomes appealing to different forms of agriculture. It's not just for large-scale operation. The example of pixel farming is also about agroecology, inserting robots specifically for that context so that we can embrace the different food system futures and not exclude some of them. That's one point. The other thing is also that I think that there's lots to be won by really also engaging with what is happening in the field, in the scene. So really that those movements like farm hack, the gaming industry engaged with farm games. I think there's a lot to connect to also make it more appealing for a lot of people who traditionally would never consider agriculture. And then the last point, I think that connects to what Kima also said about the robotics and about that it's not necessarily a threat. I think it's really important that also in on-the-job training and also thinking about the future of work in agriculture, that gets dedicated attention. I see more and more in the Netherlands, but also in other places, specific programs about the future of work. And it is both about how do we need to reskill and retool the workers, also the farmers, because the digitalization also comes with de-skilling, but also it needs some reskilling and new skills need to be developed. But also it's really about how to create the best match between robot and human. So for example, the Dairy New Zealand has a great program on workplace ergonomics, and I think their robotics really can make this much more attractive, because let's be honest, it's not nice to be bent in a field for the whole day under the burning sun. And I've seen now pictures from California, people with face masks in the smoke. That's not a nice thing. So also show those attractive sides of the robotization to the workforce.
Okay, thank you very much. Lawrence, in your intervention, it's been very interesting when you have been talking about investors that are connected to bring private investors to the field and create unicorn firms. Could you elaborate a little bit more about this and how can we improve the private investment in this area, in this field?
Well, I think that, there's now almost an unstoppable movement of more investment into ag. investors have discovered this sector. They see this thing of like world population growing, what Tom also said, the need for more and better food, also reducing the food system's negative environmental impacts. So that investment will continue. I think it's really about how can we better maybe streamline investment, target investment, and also increase the success of startups. Because I think, as with many startups, many of them fail. Also, many really don't consider what is needed beyond just a great idea or a great technology. And I think there the public sector can A, help in better matchmaking, maybe also grouping startups. B, can maybe also bring into the game more the public interests. How can we accommodate those into AgTech? So that it's not just about raising profits, but also maybe doing that in a regenerative way. And I also know there's a whole debate about, does AgTech stimulate regenerative agriculture or not? And I also think that we, as the public sector, also need to engage, a little bit into the ethics debate. And also, you know, do we want startups to eventually being merged or acquired by big companies? And not saying they're all evil, but sometimes, they promote models which some not deemed to be future-proof. Or do we really stimulate them to go towards alternatives and also develop alternative value models and value proposition in terms of short chains, different ownership models, cooperative models? So I think in that reflection space, I think the public sector has a huge role to play. And by public sector, I mean universities. I also mean that ministries, innovation funders, put that as a mandatory pillar in all AgTech programs. And I'm quite adamant on that because I think it's really important. Otherwise, we can get into Green Revolution horror scenarios, because the Green Revolution has brought a lot of good things, but we're now also reaping the not so good benefits of it. And we need to avoid that we make similar mistakes with the AgTech revolution.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I'm going to read some of the questions that we have from the participants in order for you to have the opportunity to answer them. The first one, so talking about the extension officers, as the world becomes more digital and struggles with the outbreak of COVID and other challenges facing the agri-food sector, how do you think that the extensionist of the future will look like? Maybe, Kima, that you've been talking precisely about extension agencies, you can ask. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very challenging time, and I think it's given us a renewed interest in the extension agent's capability. There was also a question in the chat, which I appreciated, a comment on why isn't the scientist encouraged more to engage with the producer early on in the research agenda, which I think is a fair point. And so, Isabel, to maybe address both of your comment and the audience's comment, we have, I think, a national funding scheme that recognized we needed to even double down on the efforts of extension agents. Instead of producing foundational knowledge that then goes to an extension agent and then goes to the producer, we need to integrate this pipeline. And so we have the researcher better aware of how they need to be developing solutions to existing problems, and not like our Australian colleague who said that we are really developing solutions to then go find problems. So with that in mind, the extension agent, and we're very lucky at the University of California, our extension agents are both embedded in the university and embedded in the extension framework, and they become a human information carrier across this bridge and connect those two communities so that we become more aware of the research capabilities. Do we even have the technology to develop the solution that might be needed? And we may have to go back to the building blocks and renew our appreciation for what technology we should even be developing. But then from the farmer's perspective, in terms of the problems that need solving, maybe they are not only AgTech, maybe they are social equity issues. These are farming communities that have been depopularized in our recent economy. And so there are elements of our solution that aren't just technical, which require a broader interdisciplinary approach within the university. So our extension agents move backwards and forwards, and we've got some examples. We have a very strong walnut processing industry here. They have been challenged with the higher power costs for drying the walnuts. And so we were trying to develop new machinery, more efficient methods for processing their products. But what we found is what they needed was not new machinery, but more efficient machinery. And we've been able to develop augmented products that they add to their current processes to make that faster, to use less energy, and still achieve the same endpoint. Because to expect an entire community to undertake a capital investment program to replace all the machines is unrealistic, even if it might be the ideal solution. So working together across this bridge with extension agents means that we come better to win-win solutions to real problems.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom, we've been talking about the multi-actor approach, and here is a question that says, are the academia and scientists approaching well to the farmers? I mean, are they really prepared to give enough room to their ideas and the practical necessities, and maybe sacrifice research on more fashion and cutting-edge technologies?
That's a hard question. I think a lot of the scientists definitely are. I mean, I know at my School of Agricultural and Forestry Engineering, there are a lot of university professors who are doing exactly that. They collaborate a lot with they work a lot on real farms. They integrate a lot with farmers. But I think it's a problem because we can't do everything, and I think this needs a solution. We can't teach and do administration and go do our research and then also find an application for that research. So I really think we need some help probably, and it would be good that as a society we think about more effective ways to do that. It was interesting to hear Kiema talk about the extension agents. I always thought that was something I envied and I thought we wanted to have here. So it's interesting to hear that they are going back and forth on this issue. I don't have a good answer on how to solve it, but I think we need something. Call it an extension agent, call it somebody who makes the network and who connects everybody. But I think the professor, to answer the question, I think the university professors are prepared, but a day only has 24 hours. So we're doing our best, but we would definitely could use some help.
Okay, thank you. Lawrence, here we have a question which is very interesting. It says, which are the alternatives to democratize all the uses of the AgTech? That means that the small producers can have an access to it.
Well, I think this is really about engaging with small producers, also incorporating them in design efforts, also looking for frugal solutions, meaning simple solutions which already work. I really like what Kima said about not kind of forcing new technology fully upon farmers, but also retrofitting, upgrading old technology. We did some work here in the Netherlands. That is what many people do. I had a great example from a student who said, well, the farmer bought the hardware, but he refused to get the software update. So apparently he got them from somewhere open source, printed them out and set in the tractor with those, you know, just make it work. From science and technology studies, we also call that tinkering. You tinker the technology, you modify it to make it work. So I think it's really also about looking at what are already, you know, great inventions that smallholder farmers have done in this area, and also how they work with very mundane apps and mundane technologies, meaning everyday technologies. We especially in the extension tool area, we always want to do the next super app, and there's like thousands of apps, and farmers, I think, they get completely lost. Why not work on basis of WhatsApp? Every farmer uses WhatsApp. Can't you use that platform, or find some way to integrate that instead of coming with the next app? Because many of those apps, they die an early death. What I also think is important, and this connects a little bit to Kima's and Tom's remarks, I just want to comment on that. For Kima, also on the role of extension, I think that extension also has a role of being kind of a human companion to help the farmer interpret all the digital information. There's some great work by colleagues. They published an article called Making Sense in the Cloud. And advisors can accompany farmers by interpreting data, also by helping them making sense of the digital data. How does that correspond to their own interpretation? So especially now that this is a new thing, I think they still have a lot of work to do also to help us, to ease us into a full reliance on the digital technology. With regards to Tom's remark also about the role of the universities, I think here we definitely might have an advantage here because we have this whole spectrum, and I think also Davis has it. I think here, in the context of Spain and in the context of Latin America, the Tecnalias, the INIAS, the INTAS, maybe they have more that role, and they collaborate a lot with universities, because I agree, you can't expect everything from a university professor, because they have a lot of balls to keep in the air, so to say. They have to juggle a lot of tasks. So it's also like a system effort, and maybe a good thing what you could do is that you analyze how are the current roles working out. I think Kima, she presented like these super flashy schemes of how they did it at Davis. Do that for Spain, do that for Chile, do that for Paraguay, do that for Brazil, do that for the Netherlands. I think we could also do such an exercise. It would be really useful. And then you can see where are the gaps. Okay, that was it. I see you like looking, stop, please.
No, very interesting. But yeah, that's a real problem that we don't have more time. So I'm going to send you a question for you all, just to conclude, and please just 1 minute, everyone, to answer it, okay? The question is, don't you believe that this change, this digital transformation, can lead to the disappearance many of our nowadays units of production? Kima, you were saying yes, so please start.
Sure. I think what you present is a market challenge. We need to ensure that we are bringing everyone along, and this includes society at large. We have a challenge, especially in the area of increasing need for protein globally, that everyone wants to have their fish every day. It is not necessarily sustainable for us all to have a high protein daily diet. And so if we look at our current standard and the fact that the planet is struggling to support this, then we need to work socially as well as technically with long-term solutions that can be applied across the board. I think that will require some flexibility. What your father or grandfather or great-grandfather planted in 1930 may not be relevant in 2030. The machinery may need to be upgraded. The government will need to support your capital investment. This is a moving system, and our current tastes are changing. Our consumer awareness of environmental sustainability is changing. So we need to be receptive and responsive and work together to make that happen.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to evolve, as Kiema said. But I think it will not just be in that certain productions of different agricultural products will disappear, if I understood correctly. I think they will also be recovered. I'm thinking if we can improve not only what happens on the farm, but digitize the whole chain until you get to the consumer. The consumer can say, okay, I want a very good tasting tomato, which is not produced industrially anymore because it gets bumped too easily. But if you can skip a whole chain and make this digital connection, so the producer has already the buyer for it at the moment of the production, then he can send it directly to the buyer. Maybe some of these niche products can be recovered, like old varieties I'm hearing a lot about for specific tomato product, but this is just one example. I think that it will definitely open opportunities as well, I think, for small producers. So I think it can be a positive change as well.
Okay, Lawrence?
Well, it will be definitely disruptive in some aspects. I think one thing to consider is there's also, like, you can make a decision not to want it. It seems as if we consider this inevitable, and if we can't say no, we don't want this, that's like also a value and an ethical debate. So that's one thing. The other thing is you can also say, you know, okay, we want it, but then how can we organize it responsibly so that we, for example, don't reduce the need for labor in rural areas completely, that in 20 years only people will live in cities in Spain and the rest of the country is filled only with robots. Could be, who knows. So you could think about, okay, well, what is the right balance? On the other hand, I also think that a lot of new jobs will be created in maintenance of machinery, data analysis, supervisors to complement the AI, etc. That still needs to pan out, but I think it's important that we think about it, that we also try to project a little bit what does it mean, and that we also then adapt our education programs. For example, Wageningen has now introduced a minor data science for all programs. It's optional, you can take it, because we see this will be like something which will be useful for the future. So yeah, you need to see what's happening and then bring that into your education programs as well. But obviously there will always be effects we can't foresee. If we look at disruptive technologies as Airbnb and Uber, I think all the people in Barcelona, they hate Airbnb. Yeah, we there gave them a free hand, so to say, to just go ahead. I think with the new wave of digital technologies, we need to anticipate a little bit better what will happen. And that includes also labor issues, that includes ethic issues, that includes economic issues. Will it be just a couple of platforms who will own everything, or do we want to democratize it more? And it's all about choices, and there also the politics of technology development come into play. And that is something also that needs to really be considered seriously, both in education, but also in the policy arena.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we have to stop here. Thank you very much for you all for this interesting exchange of views. Thank you, Eduardo Escolar, which is our translator, and we've been talking very fast. So I hope it's not so challenging as the digitalization in the agri-food sector to you. And of course, thank you to all the participants. Sorry, because we have not been able to go through all your questions. Maybe some of them can be asked in a written way. So if not, maybe via Twitter or whatever. Thank you so much. And thank you, Rosa. I don't know if you want to add something before ending this roundtable.
Sí, simplemente muchísimas gracias a todos. El resultado yo creo que ha superado las expectativas que teníamos, que ya eran de por sí altas, y nada, ojalá podamos seguir compartiendo espacios de debate y proyectos juntos, porque yo creo que compartimos objetivos y sobre todo compartimos el compromiso y la pasión por la innovación y por la formación. Así que bueno, este webinar llega hasta aquí, pero Datagri 2020 no acaba. El próximo 15 de octubre tenemos el cuarto de los webinars que organiza COAG sobre la estrategia y datos en la red agroalimentaria, y bueno, y Datagri 2020 pues finaliza con la primera semana virtual de la digitalización, que se celebrará del 16 al 20 de noviembre, así que de este programa ya informaremos en los primeros días de octubre. Y nada, pues lo dicho, Isabel, muchísimas gracias a ti, muchísimas gracias a los ponentes, muchísimas gracias a los asistentes, a los organizadores, a Eduardo, y bueno, yo creo que ha quedado más que evidente que es imprescindible que compartamos estos espacios de debate porque el sector lo necesita y yo creo que todos los actores necesitamos eso, el ver cómo podemos construir alianzas para acompañar lo mejor posible al sector en esta transformación. Así que muchísimas gracias a todos y nos seguimos viendo.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ustedes por la
Gracias.
invitación.
Muchísimas gracias.
Adiós.
Bye.